Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video I wanted to elaborate on a point I made in a recent video where I started to talk about how my goals have slowly started to change in the background of my mind, and this is something I've noticed since being in my 30s. I think like many people all through my teenage years and all through my 20s, I was dreaming big of qualifications and a career, the hustle, earning money, and all of those sorts of things. But then slowly things started to change. And if that feeling resonates with you, then don't worry, you're not alone. I'll pop that video up above so you can go and check that one out, and hopefully it will just give you a little bit of space to unpack those ideas and those feelings. And then when you're ready, feel free to come back and I'll talk about the next stage of this process. And since posting that other video, I've had some messages and some comments asking me about how to manage that daunting feeling, because I did touch on how it can be a little bit scary to have that original dream just seemingly vanish on you to be replaced by a new one, and for some of us a completely different one. And it feels like you're starting from scratch, like you would have done in your teens or in your 20s, but now you're in your 30s or maybe older than that. And where do you even begin to start dealing with that? And I think for many of us, you're just sort of, you know what's coming when you're in your teens and you're in your 20s. It's sort of, you're coming through school, you're going through school, and then you've kind of got the first step in what you will do to get into your career, whether that's some sort of college course, university, apprenticeship, work placement, and then you always sort of just know what the next step is, that you don't really have to think too much around that. But when those goals change, and especially if they're not sort of necessarily qualification or career or income driven anymore, then what do you do? So that's what I wanted to touch on in this video. But this isn't just about me talking about our goals and the things that we've got planned and the things we've talked about. Hopefully it's a bit wider than that, and these are some of the things that you can think about and the questions that you can ask yourself as you navigate through these new ideas, these new goals, especially if you've had a big sort of shift in mindset. So I will break down what Tom and I did, but hopefully some of it can be applied to you too. And it all began with just allowing a bit of time to air our thoughts on the matter, so to speak, to reset ourselves onto the same path so that we can work towards our goals together, both independently and as a couple. And your circumstance may be slightly different. You might be working towards goals in a solo fashion or in a couple or as a family. Now, I think we all know sort of the typical milestones that are expected of us as adults, and many of the goals we have, especially early on in our lives, and maybe still now, often relate to things like, as I've already said, qualifications, career, earning money, maybe getting a house, maybe getting a bigger house, maybe living in a certain place, getting a promotion, getting married, having children, things like dream holidays, dream cars. There's lots of things that might be in the picture, a lot of milestones to hit. And I think for a lot of couples especially, but also applying to families as well, those goals can be unspoken or even just assumed. Like, it's assumed that eventually we'll get married and eventually we'll have kids, eventually we'll have the house, and we might not even talk about it as much as we probably should. Or some of us might feel like we keep our biggest dreams to ourselves. It's more of a private thought that we don't share with others, sometimes even within couples and families. But it is important that we do talk about those things, because rarely is life that straightforward, and we need to ensure that we're on the same page, not only about the destination, but the journey to get there as well. And there are things from that list of milestones that Tom and I won't achieve in our lifetime, either because we choose not to, it's not a priority for us, or it's simply not the hand we've been dealt. But with that in mind, then we do need to speak about what is the dream, what are the goals that we would like to achieve both independently and together as a couple. Life continues to move on, whether we're present in the moment and setting goals or not. And Tom and I have been living together for a little over a year now, and we decided that we wanted to reset ourselves, get ourselves back on the same page, put some goals together that we want to achieve, and have an idea of what life will look like and where we're going. Not just to obtain a dream life, but to have a purposeful journey along the way, so we have something to motivate us and to guide us and to work towards together. We also wanted to be able to free up our minds from obsessing about that so much, because we've floated ideas for so long but not really settled down to have this conversation, and it does take up a lot of your brain space. Where are we going? What will the future hold? What will it look like? Are we in agreement? And we would spend so much time then obsessing in our minds about the future, and you don't want to do that too much because you want to enjoy all parts of the journey along the way. For months we've floated ideas back and forth, like in the car on the way to work or over the dinner table in the evenings, but there were a lot of ideas up in the air, and so we decided to give ourselves a bit of time to do some planning. And so the first step was to take all of that thinking out loud that we'd done over the last few months and bring it back to the surface. There were a lot of things we'd floated back and forth, some of the things I imagine we'd forgotten. So it was time to pick it all back up and have a proper conversation about it, so that we could pull out what are the key things, the important things that we wanted to shape our lives around. And I think anyone can benefit from doing that sort of thing, regardless of what the goal is, regardless of the things you want to work towards. We talked about what we wanted to change in our lives, and more importantly, why. We talked about the things that didn't truly fulfill us, or the things that were unnecessarily challenging. And we gently questioned each other. Every idea that we put out there in a supportive, sort of proactive, responsive way, we challenged the things we said. If things will look different for us in the future, in what way? Why will that be better? Is it reasonable or realistic? Having a healthy, honest and open dialogue now, so that when we do sit down later and discuss those key things we want to put into a plan, if you like, we've pulled away all the weeds and we can see the garden a little bit clearer. And we really honed in on a few key areas to begin with, one of them being home. In the future, what does our home look like, and in what way is that different from what it looks like now? Why do we want these changes in the first place? What is it that's going to inspire us to make these changes? And if this is what we want, how do we get there, and what sort of plan do we need? Is it something we'll complete in stages over a longer period of time? Will there be any obstacles in our way? Is there a plan A? Is there a plan B? Are we open to there being different possibilities along the way as we see how things unfold? Importantly, what are we willing to compromise on, and what are we not? Another big area of conversation when it came to goal setting was work. Do either of us have any plans to expand our careers, look at different qualifications, explore different avenues, do something completely different, do something extra as something on the side? And if so, why? What's inspiring those changes? Is it something that's going so well that we want to expand on that further? Is it something is not going so well and so we want to change things? If we're talking about changing work, we're also talking about changing income. So what does that look like in a few years' time? Will there be a change of income? What sort of income can we manage with? Are we happy if collectively we bring in less money? Are we looking for our income to remain the same? Are we looking to increase our income and earn more money? Do we want to work less? Are we happy to work more to explore different avenues and achieve other things? Are we happy to continue working at this capacity in order to spend a bit of time saving some more money to ensure a bit more financial stability in the future? And if we are exploring different avenues, then why? What's the motivation inspiring these? What's the earning potential? We even talked about things like the working hours. How would that change our day-to-day lives? What would that look like if we did that? And does that work for our relationship? How much impact will it have on our home life, and what are we comfortable with? With this part, we did walk and talk for hours in the fresh air, and as I said, we gently questioned the sorts of things that we were talking about to really get some clarity, so that when we sat down to do a bit of planning, we felt prepared to do that. And so the next step was to settle down back inside and just get some ideas on paper. Now, you don't have to actually write something down on paper. It might just be a conversation you had. I'm quite visual, so I liked this as an exercise, and I read around a bit and watched a few videos on a few different strategies that people tried, and this one was just that you put your bigger thoughts and ideas on post-its, move them around, categorize them, put them in a timeline, really whatever works for your overall picture, and then if you want to go into the finer details afterwards, then you can. So that was just one strategy that we went with, and so we wrote down some of those bigger ideas. The difference here to when we were outside and discussing and questioning those things is this was more of us actually building a plan, so we had to make a few choices. Now that doesn't mean everything's set in stone. I like the idea of actually living the life and enjoying it as it unfolds in front of us, but you kind of need a starting point. So this meant we actually had to make a few decisions and agree on a few things about where we were going, rather than just sort of have this open discussion and leave it all in the air. And a few key things, I've already mentioned some of them, but we kept coming back to this idea of pace and the pace at which we live our lives. We are trying to live a slower life, and we are making changes, but we also know there are a lot of changes to come. We also know that there are a few things out of our control in our lifestyle that mean that we can only do so much with this. But it helps to think ahead, it helps to think what our ideal would look like so that we can start to work towards that and put the steps in place. I've already mentioned home being a big one, but at this point, like I said, we have to start making some decisions, and we had a lot of conflicting ideas. Not in the sense of a disagreement between us, in fact we wholeheartedly agreed on everything, in the sense that we had conflicting scenarios that could be possibilities, and they all required some level of sacrifice, and so it was about deciding which sacrifice we are more willing to go with in order to have whichever version we choose to have. And we were both really clear on what each of the sacrifices were, so we were able to weigh them up and have that conversation. And as I mentioned, work was a big one also, and we talked about what we see our careers looking like in the coming years and any changes we would like to see. During this time, it was really important to talk about what was a realistic goal and what was basically a fantasy or a dream life. We are both very practical people, and so spending our lives pining over a dream life that will never be a reality is not a good use of our time or anyone's time. So I would always advise that when you're goal planning, you can have something that is high up, something that is to strive for, something that would be an amazing life to dream for, but also make it within your grasp. Don't make it so it's impossible for you to ever achieve that goal. So when we weighed things up, we kind of had like a sensible option, which would be easier to obtain, low cost, less risk, less effort, that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's not as many of the things that we really want and desire for in our lives. And then opposite to that, I have what I like to call realistically desired outcomes. So it might cost more money, it might take more effort, there might be more risk involved, there might be more obstacles along the way, sacrifice, hard work, all of those things. And then, there is everything in between. So we kept it realistic. So even the end goal, the dream life goal, was still realistic, that it is something we could achieve in our lifetimes. And we also realised that a lot of our bigger goals were connected. So in a way, we could almost sequence some of them into a timeline. Some of them were a bit more flexible, but it was kind of like we'd need to do this to be able to do this, and we'd need to do this to be able to do this. And so we started to map those out so we could figure out a starting point before we decided on the finer details. Now this next section can be a little bit tricky because finding the perfect balance is hard. It is important to think about those smaller things, about those everyday, day-to-day scenarios, what life would actually look like. So you can measure up truly if it will make you happy as a reality rather than just the idea of it, because you're going to live it eventually, and you might only be thinking about all the good things, but have you thought about all the things that happen in life now that are the things that don't really typically bring you joy? There are going to be little things every day that still make you feel that way. So thinking about the reality in the day-to-day versus just the idea of it. But on the flip side, you don't want to plan every last tiny detail. Firstly, that would be impossible, but also because you actually want to live the life. You want to be on the journey, not have it all written in stone and mapped out before you. There is joy to be had in the unknown as it happens. And on a similar thread, it's also worth considering the things that are in your control and the things that aren't, and the sort of obstacles that might put up for you, and what you will do if these obstacles occur whilst you're on the journey. Like I said, a lot of these ideas were sort of interweaved, and you have to start somewhere, and we realised it all revolved around home, which I imagine it does for a lot of people. So we really needed to decide what home was going to look like for us in the future and where that would be. We agreed on the realistically desired outcome, but also kept the sort of sensible, easier alternative in the back of our minds as sort of an option too. And for the desired option, we were quite fortunate in the sense that we realised there were 3 ways we could get to where we wanted to go, given enough time to do it. And so we kind of had a plan A, a plan B and a plan C, not in the traditional sense that plan A was the one we were going to go for, it was just the order we wrote them out. And we decided that we think plan B was the most likely for us out of the 3 options, but we at least wrote down 3 ways that we could get to this sort of realistically desired outcome. But before we could do anything, we realised that what we need first is time. We need time to research into things that we don't necessarily know about before we put things into action, so we don't get it wrong or we don't make too many mistakes along the way. We need time to save more money. We're both very good at saving, but it's important that we've got security moving forward. So the first part of our goals are both time, knowledge and finance related. So before we really action anything, that is what we will be working towards as big cornerstones of what we're doing. But there are also a few smaller things that we can be working on now, sort of along the journey, and they will benefit us now and they will be enjoyable now and they are part of life now, but will also feed into that, again, realistically desired future as well. So it all kind of comes together nicely if things go to plan. And then at the end of it all, we did give ourselves the freedom to dream a little bit and have those really optimistic, open conversations, keeping it within, this realistic idea, but we did throw really, really tiny, like now I'm talking tiny day-to-day things up in the air, like wouldn't it be nice if we could do this, and imagine if we could do this, and there was a lot of imagine if and that sort of talk at this point, but it was nice to have that moment to dream and to share those little things so that we can know what's important to each other both on the journey, and when we get there we can appreciate the tiny things that are going to make each other happy. And so by the end of it we were reset, we were on the same path, we'd made some notes about the things we wanted to do, so we had an idea of where we were going, what's motivating us to get there, and now we can both do our parts independently and together, united. It's really important to have that motivation, because sometimes you'll have a bad day and sometimes you'll get in the headspace of, well, I'm just never going to get there. And I've already had one in the short time that we've passed since making this original plan. And that's why you need that motivation to get you back on track when you do sort of just have those bad days where you don't think it's ever going to happen. And I'm sure God will inspire us and motivate us along the way, or who knows, have a completely different plan for us entirely, but only time will tell. And so when your desires and your goals change on you without you expecting it, it can feel scary, but take a bit of time to ground yourself in these new ideas and whatever is inspiring you, and make a little bit of a plan and then let the smaller details unfold in front of you and enjoy the journey. You're in good hands. It would mean a lot to me if you could engage with this video in some way, whether that's a like, a comment, or subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I'll see you in another one again very soon. God bless. Take care.